Sorry, I'm just trying to get my screens organized here.
That's okay, because I'm not seeing Mike Clark yet on
Okay.
in some of the. And I'll 3 people in the. Sometimes Mike can't, it may not work for him. So
Are you seeing my screen now, the PowerPoint slide?
mm-hmm.
Okay. Are you seeing my entire screen or just the PowerPoint slide?
The entire, we're getting Matt and Mike are coming on now.
So can you see the side of my screen over here to the right where my cursor's moving? No. Okay, good. Just, I don't use Zoom, so I always have to check my settings here.
Yeah, we just see like the main browser where the PowerPoint is.
Great. Okay. All right. Do we have the attendees on for the UPMC Bingham Street signage? I'm just checking, make sure everyone's on the call before we start.
I'm Steve Zell here with Advanced Sign. I'm waiting for Ray Bishop from UPMC.
Okay, so we're awaiting
there he is.
someone.
He's on
Okay.
I am Ray Bishop with Project Manager for UPMC, and obviously I'm on the call.
Okay, great. And do we have everyone on the call for the Wharton Street development team?
I believe so. This is Sean Gallagher with Canninger Soul and Rooney. We have about 8 or 9 people who are joining, and I think most of them are on. So I think
Great.
we could get started.
And
Okay.
and Bob Russ is on the call.
Yep.
And
Okay.
I think Jody's on the call.
Okay, great. Well, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. Tonight is the development activities meeting for the Southside Flats. This meeting is chaired by the Southside Community Council. We are a registered organization with the city of Pittsburgh. As the local RCO of the Southside Flats, the development activities meeting falls under our organization to chair on a monthly basis. This meeting allows developers, business owners, stakeholders, and the community engage in conversation related to the projects that will be presented this evening. And if you joined a few minutes late, we are recording this conversation. In addition to the Southside Community Council board members in attendance, we have a number of community members in attendance, and we also have our partners at City Planning in attendance. We have 2 projects on the agenda tonight, the UPMC Bingham Street signage, which will go in front of Historic Review Commission. And the second item on the agenda is the Wharton Street development, which will be going in front of the Zoning Board of Adjustment. Presenters, we're just going to ask that you clearly present your slides because we do have folks that call in that may not be seeing the presentation. We ask that we ask the folks in attendance to please wait till we get through the presentations to ask questions. You can use the raise hand feature in the chat, or if you'd rather type your question into the chat, I will go ahead and read those off after we get through anyone asking questions verbally. Any other questions on how to interact with the presenters after they go through their deck? Just shoot me a chat and I'll help you out there. We're going to go ahead and flip it to our first. Yeah.
Before you start, just a reminder to everyone to please stay on mute so that doesn't interfere with the presentation. And again, when you are interested in speaking, that'll be the time to take yourself off mute.
Yep. Thanks, Barb.
All right.
So we're going to go ahead and start with the UPMC Bingham Street signage project. I'm going to stop sharing my screen in order for the team to go ahead and present their deck.
Again, my name is Ray Bishop. I am the project manager for the implementation of our new brand on signage across a number of one of many project or several project managers across any number of UPMC facilities, from hospitals to outpatient centers to major practices and so on. And we had inadvertently sort of missed the whole historic, realizing we were at the edge of the historic district with our first round of development. And so we had a review earlier about 6 weeks ago. What was the name of the group, Steve, that we met with about 4 weeks ago?
They were the LRC.
The LRC.
Yeah.
Yeah, they gave us some guidance on aligning with historic review, with the Historic Review Commission requirements. And we also, of course, reviewed once we found out we were in the review or in the historic district, that we reviewed the requirements for signage there as well. So we have tailored a pretty lean package here to comply as I think as best we can with the Historic Review Commission requirements for signage. And I'd like to just go ahead and walk through that pretty quickly. Here it is. This is just our basic design package. And there are a few signs. I'll go through what we first call our location plan that fall under the auspices of the Historic Review Commission. We're going to start with, as we go through, we'll start with sign 002. These numbers are out of sequence because there were other signs in the pack that have been deleted, but because of our way our programming and all our files are set, we can't really change numbers that easily. So the numbers may seem odd in that it's not like 1 through 6 or 2 through 8 or what have you. So this is our location plan. We have a high wall sign on the Muriel Street side of the building facing the 10th Street Bridge. We have a projecting sign over one entrance. We have a directional sign on this facade. We have a freestanding pylon sign, and we have 2 small wall directional signs that aren't exactly in compliance, but I've been asked by my leadership to at least explain why we feel they're necessary. We have been, the LRC advised us of what our fallback could be if these signs were not to be approved by the Historic Review Commission. So without further ado, I'll go walk through the sign pages. This is the freestanding sign in front of the building. It complies with the Historic Review Commission requirements in the area of square footage of the sign and also in illumination. This will be an externally illuminated sign with ground mount fixtures that will be, the fixtures won't even be that visible. We do have a hedgerow that surrounds the sign, and we elevated the base of the sign a little bit to get the sign above the hedgerow so that we can maintain the character of the property with the hedges. And this is the view heading, I guess, south on 10th Street or southeast. We had previously had a wall sign here that was sort of a menu of all the services that are offered. One thing I'd like to mention here too is I know a lot of the, some people look at the criteria for signage as it applies to this typical South Side business, which would be a restaurant or bar or store. And this is actually a medical facility with multiple entrances, and the entrances each serve different patient groups. So we have a little bit different requirement for providing good directional information and so forth to our visitors, patients and visitors. This is a directional sign on the corner of the building so that when people pull in, they know what to go to the 10th Street entrance if they are seeking to find the services listed here. And that sign is placed on this facade. So when they pull in the driveway, they can see this and understand that they need to go down here. There's an entrance here, and we have a sign on that entrance as well. This sign, again, fits within the criteria for a wall sign in terms of square footage. It does not, it lists more than just obviously a business name because it is a wayfinding sign as opposed to a business identification sign. The next sign is a projecting sign that again meets the criteria. It is below the top of the windows. It is under 9 square feet. And it doesn't project more than 3 feet off of the building. And this basically the identifies the entrance. And I guess I should go back to and also identify the code blocking that we have here. In our lobby, we'll have a directory if somebody gets out of the car and walks in, or we may even put a small directory in the window itself at the entrance that identifies the services by code block, and that makes it easier for patients to find their way around the building by following the color-coded code blocks. There are two signs that we're going to show. These again are entrance identification and wayfinding signs, and these are located on Bingham Street. There are two. This is the first of two. This is at the entrance, our number 3 entrance that covers that identifies our Bingham entrance 3 and provides directional information to direct people to the other entrances. We
Hey,
have
Ray, Ray,
yes,
can I
sir.
interrupt you real quick? Are you the 412-418-7329 number? Or are you on your laptop? There's someone on the
I'm on a lap-
landline. There's someone
No,
on
I'm
a,
on a-
yeah.
I'm on a
Yeah, I'm on a
laptop.
laptop.
Okay, can the call-in number, I believe this is the one causing all the static in the background, 7329, please go on mute. Thank you.
Now, there are two entrances here we probably should have shown in context, but the next sign, for better context, the next sign is a similar sign, and again, size-wise, it fits within the criteria. I know the criteria calls for one sign on the facade. I was asked by our leadership, because of the function of the signs and the aid to patients, that if we could seek to have two signs to be given clearance to install two small, they're only 5 square foot signs. And this is at the second entrance, entrance number 4. And again, it provides, if somebody goes to the wrong entrance, it'll direct them around the building to the other. In our discussions with the LRC, they did say that if we put the signs on the interior of the glass, that we would be fine. Our leadership asked, but from a functional standpoint, that particularly with this entrance, it kind of puts it far away from the entrance. And if we put it on glass next to the doors, it's not visible from the street until you're actually on the entrance, at the entrance itself, because of the setback for the entrance in the alcove. The last sign is a small high wall sign. It is 18 inches, which is the maximum size allowed under the historic district criteria. And this sign is mounted on Muriel Street. We had originally proposed, before our knowledge of the criteria, a larger sign by 6 inches higher on the building. But after discussion with the LRC, we understand we're not allowed to be higher than the base of the second floor windows, and the letters can't be higher than taller than 18 inches in height. These are non-illuminated fabricated letters that we were advised also not to cover ghost signs or anything like that. So we tried to find a position that gives us some function, at least at the intersection. And whether it's approved or not, we still make a value-based decision to say, you know, is it worth investing in probably a couple $1,000s in a sign that you're really only going to see if you're stopped at the red light. You're going to drive right past it if you have the green light. But we did want to include it in the package. It may very well end up not being included in the final implementation based on, again, a value-based decision from our leadership. And that is the extent of the package.
Great. Thanks, Ray, for presenting that. I'm sure there's a lot of people on the phone that know that working on a wayfinding package, let alone a healthcare facility wayfinding package, is an art in its own. So I wanted to flip this over to Bob Russ or anyone on the LRC that may want to just go over what this team met with these presenters last week and make sure that they've sort of addressed your concerns, and then we can take any other questions from the group.
Thanks. Yeah, we did meet with them and go through, and there were many more signs. We were able to kind of tailor that back a bit with their assistance, which we appreciate. You know, it is a complex building and it's a multi-entrance, but so are a lot of the buildings at Southside Works. So I'm not I understand from a medical center perspective and what UPMC does at a lot of their other facilities that may encompass multiple buildings linked together. And I'm always lost when I go into any of their facilities, not unlike any other hospital I go into by any other network. They tend to be big sprawling buildings and have multiple entrances. And sometimes it's a lot of confusion as to which part of the building or what part of the medical center you want to go to. That said, it's not unlike a lot of the projects up at Southside Works, which are block-long buildings in many cases with multiple entrances and businesses. Now there, you have a lot of storefront tenants that each are allowed to have their own signage for their business. But there are entrances for lobbies for the upper stories and other things going on down there. Generally, this is pretty close to what we were talking about. So we'll take them one by one. The UPMC letters here that we're looking at, no problem. They repositioned them. That's great. Complies with the guidelines as far as the letter height. That's great. So I don't think we have any issue here. I just had pointed out, I know one member on the HRC loves ghost signs. Whether we all know that, it's not in the guidelines that we preserve them or not cover them over or do anything like that. But I know that particular member is always very sensitive to the ghost signs. So that's why we kind of gave them that advice. So that one's not a question. I don't think there's an issue there. On the monumental corner sign, it sits on the ground. Again, it's limited in height and in size and all falls within the guidelines. I don't think we had any issue with that from the get-go, and it's been retailored a little bit just to tighten it up a little bit, and had a lot more wayfinding information on it. So we're down to just the business name and the address. So we appreciate that.
I'd like to also
go ahead.
I'd like to also point out that our original plan, because of our standard sign type for this type of sign, without our knowledge of the criteria, had been internally illuminated, and we have changed our specification to have external illumination.
And we very much appreciate that. That brings it into compliance. You may want to add, when you go to HRC, a view from the other direction, just to see how much that tree impacts. And that's not so much a guideline issue. It's just more just design wise, whether you're happy with the placement of that sign and its view coming off of Carson and down 10th Street or from the other streets. But from the guidelines, you're allowed a monument sign, and this one complies. So we're over the hurdles there. I think there's a case here, if you want to think about it or not. I mean, you could go to HRC with this package. The other signs are a little bit smaller, and it's almost a question as to whether or not they're even signage in the terms of business signage. That's kind of what the guidelines are going after here, and kind of set standards to. And it's an open question I hadn't thought of when you were in our meeting with us, but now seeing how you've tailored the package, why wouldn't you perhaps on these smaller signs, wall signs near the entrances, or even your projecting sign, perhaps at the top of the sign, I think you call it the VCT or VTC something. You just have 10th Street address. Like, number one, why wouldn't you put UPMC there, or identify the facility? Is it just known as the 10th Street entrance, and the people that go to the 10th Street entrance know sort of what facility they're trying to get to there? I think there's room for you to identify the separate parts of your facility by name if they have different names or
well, the intent is, let me go back to a picture. Either within the lobby or behind one of these windows, there will be a menu of the services. And if you're a patient coming, it's UPMC, you've seen the sign, you'll see the identification on the door, which will also be on all the entrance doors, the UPMC. So in our wayfinding methodology, the key is you're already on the UPMC facility. So what service am I looking for, and where is that located? Say, look at the menu, and if it's behavioral, just to make up a name, behavioral health 1 or what have you, that's at the 10th Street entrance. So, and they'll see the purple code block 10th Street entrance. And we've on this sign, there's the programs there, so they could look at the window, they could look at this sign and know they're headed in the right direction.
Okay.
So That's the intent. And again, the one of the reasons we would,
On the top.
at that point, you're a pedestrian. We don't need to have large signs that
Here,
are visible to vehicular operators. So we wanted to keep the signs small because their function is wayfinding for pedestrian. There's no need to make them large, and there's no need to overwhelm, with 4 signs or whatever on the building, applying UPMC to every sign. So
Okay.
trying to stay into the spirit of these signs have a function beyond. Their primary function is not to identify and advertise UPMC. Their primary function is direct the patients around to the proper entrance.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that.
Mhm.
So I guess as a reference for everybody else, the guidelines don't really state what's on the sign per se. I believe, and Jody may have a better understanding of this, the underlying zoning district signage guidelines may say that only business names are allowed on the signs, not all the stuff you do inside. So this might be something locally in the zoning code that I don't know if HRC will key into. But I guess the point is simply, they could have more signage based on the frontage of this building in size. And I guess HRC may take a position that almost each facade or each entrance could have its own identifying sign over the doorway or next to it. This wall sign that we see in this image is a little bit unusual and different than the guidelines would kind of dictate and or understand, I guess. So I'm curious to see how HRC will apply this.
Yeah. The taking your thought, Robert, a little further, when we look at the this side of the building, the issue we have here, if we by city code, exclusive of historic review, you're only allowed 1 projecting sign.
That's right.
Or encroaching projecting sign for facade. And so we could not come up with one that could function for both entrances. And we also have another issue in that there's like 6 inches of foam over the brick on this building to install the EFIS, or exterior insulation finish system, for people who don't know what EFIS means. It's synthetic stucco with insulation behind it, to structurally mount a sign that's going to have a pretty, I wouldn't say significant, but it will have some shear load, became a problem, and the need to identify 2 entrances. So that's why we went with the small wall signs. And again, as we discussed in our earlier meeting, Robert, we could put them on the glass, on the inside of the glass, and they would then be outside of the purview of the Historic Review Commission. However, we don't think that provides the best function for our patients. So that's why I've been asked by my leadership to see if they, considering that they're not advertising, their function is to be wayfinding and identify entrances only. They're not festooned with UPMC health system, or well, we don't use it anymore, UPMC logos and colors and all of that. They're simply small functional signs. So that's why I was asked to keep them in the package at this level. And if there's a sentiment that there's no way now how before the Historic Review Commission, then we'll review that, or I'll discuss with my leadership and see what they'd like to do.
Yeah, no, you're right on the projecting side. I guess like in this case, on that image, if you want to come back, if it said UPMC and that little color code number and Bingham entrance on a wall sign above that entrance, like a business sign would be, a business name above a doorway in the signboard, and is flat on the wall, not a projecting sign. And then your wayfinding elements are behind the glass, adjacent. That's another way to do it that might, be more agreeable to the HRC.
Okay.
I don't want to speak for them, and all I'm trying to say is, all we look for here is sort of precedent. Either you're complying with the guidelines as written and it's very clear that you demonstrate that or not, or we try to think through if UPMC does this kind of wayfinding thing. And I think we've had this down at Southside Works. Someone wanted a sign for their business on the corner when they were down the block. And I think we all pushed back against that because we could see where other businesses would want to start putting their signage away from their storefront, but on the corners of intersections, or we saw, at least at Southside Works, that could very easily start to get out of control. And the guidelines didn't really state that. And this is a little bit similar in that I can think of many other businesses that would love to have their name on the sign plus everything they're doing inside. So we just try to see how this example might be applied throughout the neighborhood if HRC lets the precedent slide. So I'm just
Well,
trying I don't have an answer, but I don't know what Jody thinks.
On this sign, we're not even listing the services that are provided inside. We've given you the opportunity to acquire that information at the main entrance. And so it's really just wayfinding directions. I will take your advice and go back to my leadership and suggest that if you can see my cursor, that we identify the entrance with a small sign, compliant sign above the entrance, although that's a little high out of the normal cone of pedestrian vision, or cone of vision for a pedestrian, and then apply the wayfinding information on the glass. We could perhaps, and again, this could be a structural question, put some form of architecturally, aesthetically pleasing filler bar between these two columns, or I guess you call them columns, and place the sign on that to get it. And the only reason we would do that is, again, to get the sign down in the normal cone of vision for a pedestrian walking this sidewalk. And we could do the same at the other entrance as well. So I think there are some options that I can take back to my leadership and say, I think this will be highly functional in this fashion as well. We will identify the entrance and we'll provide the wayfinding information on the glass, or on the second surface, the glass inside the glass.
Yeah. So all I'm saying is monument sign, UPMC letters, no problem. These little smaller signs with wayfinding, I'm curious to see how HRC approaches them. And all I'm trying to do is suggest a way that comes closer to what you would see in the district as an approach.
Much appreciated. I know, I think when we met earlier, whoops, wrong way. We had determined this sign was compliant as well. Yeah,
I agree. Okay. Again, it's odd, the information that's on the sign, it's just different, but you're within your right.
We could make a case for, since it is along 10th Street, to apply a UPMC logo strip at the top or bottom or something like that. But again, I'll defer to my leadership and see if they want to include that and keep it within the 9 square feet if we can do that. And it's aesthetically pleasing. And we want the sign, if it's going to start to push functionality, crossing the line of pedestrian functionality, vehicular functionality, we want to make sure that it actually functions. And sometimes for vehicular users, you can have too much information on a sign.
Fair enough.
A pedestrian can stop and read the sign. Not so easy in a car sometimes, or most times, I should say.
All right.
I also, if I may interject, Steve Zella has been signs. We can also, it can be ruled as convenience information signs. They don't contain advertising matter. They're under 6'8" from the wall. They don't project more than 3 feet. They don't exceed 18 feet in face area. So, I mean, there is a stipulation in the code for that. And I mean, I might be able to even talk to someone in the Department of Mobility of Infrastructure to maybe even have a hand in saying, like, yeah, this looks good. These are public information signs more so than anything else. So that's also something to look into.
Right. It's not like you're selling beer and chips and chicken and stuff like that. That's sort of what we're pushing back against.
I think the only issue, I agree with Bob. I think this submission as it stands is in compliance. And the wayfinding signs, to your points, are kind of a question mark. How are they going to see those? But I would kind of side with you guys, UPMC, saying they're wayfinding. They have a different function. They're not necessarily advertising. And you have so many facades that you can actually have a decent amount of signage on each facade. So there's, because it's such a large building with so many streets facing so many streets. The one question would be, if you do pursue the Bingham Street side with 2 wall signs, they might be able to hit you there simply because you're only allowed 1 per facade facing the street. So although the wayfinding signs, you might get away with, placing them down closer to pedestrian level, adjacent to the doors, saying they're not advertising. If you did try to do like a transom bar or something above the doors with UPMC on them, they might say you're only allowed one.
Mhm.
Appreciate that. Then the only other thing I would say is a little bit of placement, like where that sign is placed kind of on that reveal feels a little, I don't know, misplaced aesthetically. And that's outside the guidelines. That's just as a designer talking to you. What is
Yeah,
it?
it's a strange building, and you can see there's reveals everywhere, and it feels crowded if we place it here, and it feels even further away if we put it over here. So I think my best strategy is, if we cannot have two entrance identification signs that would only say this and the top information, Bingham Entrance 1 or Bingham Entrance 2, then I would be more apt to recommend to my leadership that we incorporate all this information and put it on the glass and live that way.
Mhm.
The only problem with that is it's this one, not necessarily a problem. The problem that my leadership would have would be that we're kind of, well, let's go to the next slide. When we go on the glass here, it's a 6 of one, half a dozen of another, in terms of not necessarily great function, in that we put it here, it's kind of far away from the entrance, but if we put it on for the glass here, that I don't have a straight on shot readily available, but there's basically it's a balanced symmetric entrance, in that there's side lights on both sides of the door the same size. If we put it here, it reduces its function in a different manner, in that it's difficult to see as you walk along the sidewalk because of the roughly 3-foot inset in the alcove. So that's the only issue that I would have with that one, is it's not going to be the greatest function, but I will again discuss that with our leadership and make adjustments accordingly. Or if they advise me, I should say, that we'd really like to go for this, and have the Historic Review Commission tell us absolutely no before we fall back.
Yeah, and on that side, I mean, if they do have pushback on the wayfinding signs, and they do call them signs regardless, I mean, there's an opportunity to do a wall sign at that one entrance, which would be your wayfinding there, and then do a projecting sign at this entrance. And that would be allowable, because you're allowed one of each per facade.
Okay. Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, we do have some structural issues with putting a projecting sign up. So
Yeah.
Okay.
To get
Any other comments from the LRC?
No, we're good, Jackie. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Bob. Thanks, Jody. Matt
Mhm.
Brungo,
Thank you.
you have your hand raised. We'll go to you. If you go off mute, please.
Thanks, Jackie. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
sir.
All right, thanks. Hey, guys, I appreciate you coming. I have a quick question just for clarity's sake, because I feel like you've been talking a little bit about both issues, but primarily you've been talking about review, like historic review. In terms of zoning, does the sign package we've just seen, does it require any variances? And I honestly don't know the answer. Is this in the East Carson Street signage district, or is this just the regular signs in the standard section of the zoning code?
That is.
No, it's in the historical district, and they have like 40 square feet of wall signage, technically.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
also, they could get away with code 919.03N, identification signs for
Any
position.
report, Matt?
The sign shall not exceed 5 square feet in area, and the use shall be limited to one sign per each principal entrance. They shall not be illuminated, and then there's more to like where it can be placed on the wall, but there is that too.
Yeah, I guess so. My question was just, if you get through historic review, will you have to go before the ZBA to get any variances before you can get an occupancy for your signs? I don't know the answer. It was just a question. I don't know, because typically you guys get to the dam, it's easier to kind of review it all and see what the answers are. So if you know, and you need a variance, I just like, it'd be interesting to know what it is.
Our, we may have to dig a little bit deeper, but our initial understanding is that we, in terms of complying with the city sign ordinance, square footage, et cetera, number of signs, because we have a number of entrances, we are in compliance. We do, the freestanding monument sign is allowable. The high wall sign is allowable. I don't, in our internal discussions on zoning and with our sign vendor and so forth, the only sign that requires anything out of the ordinary would be this sign, because it requires council approval, and that is normal for any projecting sign. Encroachment, I'm sorry, they call it an encroaching sign. And so before the code, the building department will issue the permit for this sign. We fill out the application, we submit it, then it is submitted as to council for review, and they can say yes or no. They typically do not, is my understanding, as long as it complies with everything else. So there's a sort of an extra layer of approval, but it does not have to go before the zoning review board or zoning hearing board for this sign.
And just to be clear then, so you're saying when you submit this sign package to zoning, it'll go over the counter and be approved, and you'll get an occupancy permit without.
Except for this sign, this has an extra layer, an extra step in the process.
Okay, thanks. That was my main question. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, this sign won't be a variance situation. It's just an extra layer of approval. Now, I suppose the council could come back and say no, and that would trigger a variance action, I guess. But our understanding in talking to the code enforcement folks is that this sign's nothing out of the ordinary in terms of an application for this type of sign pretty much anywhere, any commercial district within the city. So.
Yeah,
Commercial or
projecting
business
signs
district.
have pretty much the same code all around.
Yeah. So.
I don't see anyone else with their hand raised for questions on this signage package. Do we have anyone on the phone with any questions? No? And when is this going in front of the Historic Review Commission?
Not until February.
In
after the
February.
recess.
Okay, great. Well, if anyone wants additional information on the next steps, this project will present in front of the Historic Review Commission in February. You do have the opportunity to provide public comment. If you would like to know how to do that, it's a simple Google search, or go to the city's website under Department of City Planning and the HRC tab, and you can go ahead and see how you can participate in those hearings. Thanks, Thomas. All right, we're going to go ahead and go to our second project of the evening. That is the Wharton Street development. We're going to go ahead and ask that team. Oh, and by the way, thank you everyone from the UPMC team for showing up tonight and giving us the presentation. Forgot to say that.
Thank you all for all of your time.
Feel free to stay on.
Thank you all for all of your time. We appreciate it, and certainly with the LRC folks and the guidance they've been provided us has been most helpful, and hopefully we'll have some success with the HRC. But that's the next step. Thank you.
Great, thanks everyone. All right, we'll flip it over to the Wharton Street development team. You can go ahead and share your screen when you're ready. If you'd like to give us introductions, that's fine as well.
Yeah.
And I'll remind everyone to allow the team to go through their presentation. If you'd like to ask a question at the end, please raise your hand or put it in the chat, and we'll go through everyone. Thanks.
Thanks, Jackie. This is Sean Gallagher with Buchanan, Ingersoll & Rooney, and we represent Gray Star, who's developing or proposing a new multi-unit residential building at Wharton Street. There's a whole host of us. We're going to break this up. I have George Hayward, Dan Nickerson, and Tyler Royston from Gray Star. Our architects, Chris Harvey, Wei Cheng, and Ryan Kotz. And I believe from our engineering team at CEC, we have Jerry Kladowski and Chris Droznik on. Sorry if I missed anybody. But just briefly, some of you may recall a number of years ago, I believe 5 or 6 years ago, we represented Edward Community Development that had a very similar project at this site. We met with you, I think in 2016, a couple of times, and we needed 2 zoning approvals. One to go to 60 feet in height and have 5 stories. And the other was, that was at the time the Riverfront Overlay District ordinance was in place, and there was a 500-foot building length variance that we needed. As you are all aware, the zoning code has since been amended and it changed the height requirements, but it also adopted that same 500-foot provision in the RIV. So this project, it's the same height as that Edwards approval, but so no zoning approval will be needed for that. But with respect to the building length, it will exceed 500 feet, just as the Edwards project did. So that project fell apart in large part because there was a railroad spur, and the railroad would not vacate it. So there was litigation and that occurred over the past couple of years, and finally able to get that resolved. So Gray Star is picking up the project and proposing something substantially similar. And I think that you'll see this is a very exciting project. So with that, I'll hand it over to George, if he's on, or Dan.
I just had to admit him. He may have been on and then fell off, so he's back on. George is.
Thank you.
I really appreciate you all taking the time to meet with us today and talk more about our project. My name is Dan Nickerson. I'm a development director here at Gray Star, based out of the Philadelphia office. We cover development for Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware out of our Philadelphia office. We're really excited for this project, as well as engaging with the community on this project. This will be our second project here in Pittsburgh. Our first project, we partnered with Echo Realty in Shadyside in their redevelopment of the Giant Eagle, and adding retail, where we are building the apartments, 230 apartments above them. We engage with the community extensively there, and we're looking forward to starting construction very soon on that project. Gray Star is also very well known for their property management, as they're the largest property manager of apartment units in the United States. And here in Pittsburgh, we manage about 1,400 units. So we're very familiar with the Pittsburgh market. As Sean alluded to, we've been working with the land seller on this project since 2019. We're really big believers in the South Side and love, as you can see on this slide, the connectivity to the bike infrastructure, as well as the 48 and the 75 bus lines right on East Carson Street, as well as the Birmingham Bridge and the connectivity that it offers to our future residents. Lastly, before handing this presentation off to our architect team, I also want to talk about how Gray Star as a whole, but our team as well, are really big believers in design. We believe that the design of the building adds value not just to the tenants, but really to the community as a whole. And we really try to make our buildings fit into the architectural language around our building and into the community. We also really focus on ways that we can connect both kind of the private space of the building with the public, and making the community feel as if that building is not just kind of someone else's, but really part of the community. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Chris so he can walk you through the design language of the building and kind of how we thought about it.
Great. Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it. Hello, my name is Chris Harvey. I'm a director of design at Horde Copeland Architects. Dan set this up nicely. We're very excited about this project. We were fortunate enough to work on the Glass House project that has just been completed, and got to work with the city and River Life and the community, and just learned a lot. And we love the South Side. We like the energy. I feel this site's even more embedded and has a lot to offer. It just has so much connectivity. And this map you're looking at here is, just shows a lot of the bike routes, all these bike routes that are coming through. And currently, as you know, if you've been down to the site, not the most pleasant place to probably ride your bike next to some of these more kind of empty buildings. So we're really excited about bringing activity, bringing that kind of energy that is all over, this neighborhood, towards the end of 23rd and 24th Streets. And there's a number of things that we're doing that is very different than the previous scheme. And we're going to get into that a little bit. I'm going to talk a lot about the planning of this project, and then I'm going to hand it over to Ryan Couts, also from my firm, that's going to talk a little bit about the skin, the massing, and the languages of the building. But we did a deep dive with Greystar, talking about what this building should be. And unlike the previous design that was a courtyard building, we really wanted to try to open this up and engage the community a little bit more. And you're going to see that. You can kind of start to see it here at the end of 23rd Street, how we're opening one of our courtyards up. Instead of 4 courts, we have 3 courts. So they're bigger, especially this last one. And those are ideas that we even incorporated in our previous project in Pittsburgh, where, we like to kind of show that off. I think Bingham Street Bridge is an important bridge, a connector, out to the peninsula. And we want, to kind of unveil what is happening. And that courtyard is also going to open up to the views back to the city. So, the residents from this building looking back to the city skyline is, which is beautiful and impactful. So we want those connectivities. We don't want to really just make this an island and close it off. So a lot of interesting things, as you all know, with this site. I think most people are familiar with it, but 23rd and 24th do not continue through to the Riverfront Park. There is the train tracks. They're still there. And there's quite a bit of land between the edge of our building and kind of the shoreline, almost 300 feet. So there's quite a bit of wooded area there. It might not seem it, but I think along this kind of shoreline, it's one of the more densely vegetated areas right in here. So if you're up on the bridge now, you can hardly see this site. It's got layers of pretty mature trees in it. So there are access points, at different parts. Obviously, Southside Works has one. You can see it's the yellow marker, connecting over to the trail and to the park. And I think over on 18th Street, there's also a connection there. So you can go to the next shot. This is just kind of a massing view. Again, we're going to have prettier pictures on the architecture, but it just kind of shows the massing and these courtyards. And again, this kind of openness, the city view towards the west, that last courtyard opening up, but also the engagement when people are coming over the bridge, they're kind of looking into, one of our beautiful courtyards. And the residents here, these courtyards are all connected internally. So residents can kind of go from one court to the next court through kind of passages, and then lead out to that main courtyard and then walk right down to the 23rd Street. And as some of you might know, if anybody's ever taken that bike path that goes across Wharton Street and actually goes under the bridge, there have been improvements made. So there's actually a ramp under there because there is some grade change. There's a set of stairs. So there is a very good connector, and that would lead residents right on Wharton Street, right over to Eagle Giant and all the amenities, the park that is on the other side of the bridge. So we feel that is a strong connection right there. It's not just a scary place, but we could see residents really using that. taking their dogs for a walk and really animating this part, of the city. We think that's important. You can go to the next shot. And when we originally talked about the building with our developers, and as Stan was mentioning, they love kind of telling a story with their buildings and engaging the context. This has amazing context, south side, what is south of our building, this kind of red bar is, very contextual, a lot of really unique buildings. Yes, there are on Wharton Street, across Wharton Street, there are still some large industrial buildings, but right past that, there's the richness of the south side, the unique row houses. There's so many different ones, unique rooftops on the tops of them, different scale, 2, 3, 4-story row homes, and some really beautiful ones in this little pocket right here. So we wanted to kind of, engage that. And then really on the water side, we did a lot of deep dives and just the imagery of, the steel history, the industrial history that went along these, this shoreline. It was what really was the economic engine of Pittsburgh. So we wanted to give a nod to that, a historical nod to that. So you'll see, with this kind of opening of the courtyard, there's 2 slightly different languages to this building. The one that is closest to the neighborhood will be masonry and have fenestration similar to these row houses. This is a multi-family building, so we're not, unlike the previous design was trying to replicate townhomes. We're really kind of building off of some of the larger, smaller buildings that exist in this neighborhood, but making them unique, making them different, making them rich, trying to break up the lengths of these facades. And you'll see that blue building there is kind of, we're calling it the head house or the head building. What is also unique to this building, coming down 23rd and coming down 24th Street, we wanted some activity there. As everybody knows, we have parking underneath a base previous to the, similar to the previous design. We need to park this building. And so this is a podium building where all the parking will be underneath these courtyards. But we wanted some activity right when you come down the street and actually seeing it from Bingham Street Bridge. That blue building is kind of our main amenity space. Ryan's going to walk you through some of that. It's a very exciting element. It will be illuminated at all times and a really welcoming gesture when you come down the street. You can go to the next shot. And again, this kind of shows that base level. Okay, so there's not a lot of detail in this. This is mainly parking. It's going to have our servicing. There are a couple areas, as I mentioned, the lobby, which is that head house. You'll see it in its larger form because it kind of takes over the podium level. But it is important. That's where drop-offs will happen. There's going to be a lot of activity. There's going to be a 2-story volume that'll take residents and visitors up to that main courtyard space that you'll be looking into. And we're also, working at trying to, on coming down 24th Street, animate that ground floor as well. So it's something that we're looking at doing and bringing some activity to that area. So there is this kind of welcoming notion on both sides, on both streets when you're coming down. And will have a fire lane and plenty of plantings around our building, street parking. We're following all the guidelines of the city as we move around the building as well. You can go to the next shot. And it's just a little bit more of a detailed shot before I kind of hand it off to Ryan to talk about kind of the skin. It shows these courtyards. Again, we're going to have some great kind of connectors through the building so residents can kind of move through this. And then you can see here, you'll see it in his renderings, there's this grand stair that will lead you right down to 23rd Street. And we really like that. It was something that we did at Glass House where we really tried to get the residents to engage the streets. Everybody has dogs and people, you're so close to the riverfront here, people use that, which we love about Pittsburgh. They'll take their bikes down there. They will go for jogs down there. So we want to get residents instead of just going down an elevator, internalized, let them kind of come down and be a part of that. And again, that's going to be from Bingham Street Bridge. You'll be kind of looking down onto this activity that will occur right here. So there's a number of things we're doing. There's some staggering and breaking of masses that Ryan will speak about a little bit. And again, this a little bit more contextual language versus this nod to what happened along the riverfront and that great history that is Pittsburgh as well. So with that, I'm going to let Ryan kind of move you through some of the massing, skin, languages of the building that we've explored.
All right. Thanks, Chris. Yeah, my name is Ryan Kaus with Wharton Street. And as Chris mentioned, we really wanted to design a building that feels like it's an integral part of Pittsburgh and this neighborhood. So I'm going to walk through these elevations, but we also have some perspective views after that that give a much better feel for the way that you'll actually experience the building. So in this view, the top elevation represents the primary facade along Wharton Street, which faces the neighborhood, like Chris was saying. We really felt it was important to make this facade feel smaller and more pedestrian scaled. And we feel we accomplished that by breaking it into 3 smaller pieces, left, middle, and the center of that area. What we're calling the head house, like Chris said, is on the left, and it'll be a real focal element on the building. That's where we have the main residential entrance, as well as the amenity spaces at level 2 and the top level. As we go to the middle portion of the building, we'll have a beautifully detailed brick facade with 4 levels of residential units over the ground floor parking. And then on the right side, it features a brick facade that steps down at the top level to help reduce the scale of the building, as well as the corner tower element that acts as a focal point at the intersection of 24th Street. So the bottom 2 levels there, again, feature that 2-story walkout units that have direct connection to Wharton Street, and are really help enliven that pedestrian experience. The elevation on the bottom is the west side of the building along 23rd Street. Again, we can see that focal point of the head building, the head house here. And that will feature the sculptural roof form, which we're having clad in a beautiful Core 10 steel material, which really alludes to Pittsburgh's rich steel history. On the left side of the elevation is an iconic floating box element that faces towards the Birmingham Bridge and overlooks the river as well. And between that and the head house, this area in here, you can see into the 2nd floor amenity courtyard, as Chris was describing in the plan. Going around to the riverside here, this is north facing, again, facing the river. This portion of the facade is designed to really recall the industrial heritage of the site with these sawtooth forms. You can see that in the plan better. And corrugated materials. While we have neutral color for the majority of the facade, which kind of alludes to that industrial corrugated metal panels of the old waterfront buildings, we have included accent colors to add some life and playfulness, as well as these big, beautiful, corner windows at the living rooms, which will have great views back to the city skyline as well. The bottom elevation faces east along 24th Street. On the left, you can see that tower element that anchors the corner. And this is also where we have secondary garage entrance at the bottom here, as well as service areas for the building. I'm just going to quickly go over this. The building sections, we have 2 of them showing the cut through the building. And we can see that we have the lower level parking underneath the entire building. But again, we are showing where we have walk-up units along Wharton Street there to really activate that ground level at that location there. So now we're going to go through a few perspective views to really give a better feel of how these buildings will look in real life. So this is that head house corner that we were talking about at the corner of Wharton and 23rd Street. So the head house is conceived of as sort of an industrial grid-like building, the base of the building, but with this beautiful sculptural rooftop amenity space. That'll be a real iconic feature for the building. The top features this sawtooth roof form, which is clad in a beautiful earthy brown Core 10 steel material, and north-facing clear-story windows at the top that'll bring in light to the amenity space. This design really recalls those sawtooth forms that you can see in old industrial buildings throughout the area. We've also brought that Core 10 steel material down, brought that down to the ground as a frame highlighting the main residential lobby entrance. The lobby is a 2-story space here that opens into the amenity space on the 2nd floor. And that also opens into the courtyard that on the left side of the image there. So on the left side of the image, we can see that floating box I was describing earlier, which cantilevers over the base and projects out towards the city skyline. This will be another iconic view that you'll see when you're approaching the area on the Birmingham Bridge. So next, we're going to go down the street this way and look at this corner over here. So this is the southeast corner at Wharton and 24th Street. The corner brick tower element creates a strong visual anchor, sort of a gateway to the project. At the ground level are the two-story units I described earlier, and these will be great units. They're always very popular with tenants. They provide a lot of life and activity at the pedestrian level and really connect the residents to the neighborhood. So we've set the building back a little bit from the property line to give some space for landscaping along the building edge as well. Looking further down Wharton Street, this facade, we have the series of different building forms. Again, we have like 3 different building feels there. The middle one really takes that brick all the way to the top, and the other 2 have the brick coming down a little bit lower, but they do have these projecting bays, almost like dormers, that really help to break up that roof line rather than getting a really long building roof line. We're also playing with different brick and siding colors to make it feel like a series of different buildings. And on the right side of the tower over here, you can see that garage entry that we have around the corner. And just out of the view of this frame here, we have the service area as well. So now we're going around to the other side of the building, facing the riverfront. And this is what we're really excited about, this facade too. We think it's going to be a really cool experience with these stepping sawtooth forms, really fitting into that heritage of these industrial buildings. The stepping forms not only help to break up the facade, but they also provide multiple corner units with these great corner glass living rooms overlooking the river and with views back to the city skyline. So the windows on this facade are more vertical in proportion, really, again, helping to break up the kind of horizontal nature of this building. And one of the cool features that we have inside the building is that where we have the stepping of the buildings there, we have interior corridors that kind of daylight onto windows, so everybody has access to these views of the riverfront. The other part of the building over here is something we're also very excited about. Again, we're calling it the floating box, which has this very industrial feel to it with this kind of corrugated cladding and these great balconies overlooking back to the city skyline. So this view that we have here that you're seeing in this view is pretty much what you would see when you're crossing the Birmingham Bridge and looking back to our building. We really feel it's a very dynamic and an exciting view with a lot of interesting forms. And then finally, wrapping around back to the 23rd Street facade. This is the west side of the building. This is where we open up the amenity courtyard to make that visual connection with the neighborhood. And residents can see out towards the skyline and neighbors can see in, giving a real sense that they're part of the excitement of the space. So on the left, you see that the courtyard side of the floating box with these great living room windows and balconies. And on the right, you see the head house with the iconic sawtooth roof forms and this Corten steel frames around the entry. And we have another frame around here with the 2-story amenity space. In the middle, your eye is drawn to this beautiful simple steel structure along the back wall, which contains balconies for the adjacent units. And then in the courtyard, there's going to be lush landscaped amenity terrace with beautiful pool and lots of activity to be seen kind of spilling out of the building. Along the left side here, you can see that cascading set of stairs that Chris was talking about that connect down from the courtyard level down to the street, really offering residents convenient access to the neighborhood for walking your dog, going for a bike ride, whatever, on the nearby trails. We really feel that this building is designed to be connected inside and out and to be very social and an active part of the neighborhood. So that's
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, Sean. Thanks, Chris.
1 second, Jackie. Do you have the couple extra slides at the end of this, Ryan?
I do.
Yeah.
I just put them at the end here.
Yeah, thank you.
So if we could go over those, that would be great.
Yeah.
I just want to remind everyone that this project is here for a dam review because the building is in the RIV-IMU zoning, and the applicants here tonight are requesting a variance. And that variance is to go beyond the 500-foot length of the building. And currently as designed, I believe you guys are at 566-ish feet, which is about 66 feet over the allowed 500 feet. So if you could talk more about the site plan and your hardship here, that would be great.
Yeah, so thanks, Jackie. We are working right now through, putting together the plan to go. This will eventually go through the planning commission, but as a, a preliminary first approval, we do need to get the dimensional variance. So that's why we're here. As you can see, at 579 feet, I mean, the distance or the length of the building is shorter than what's already existing. You probably go to the next. But in terms of hardship, I don't know how, this is a wider block. We addressed this in greater detail during the Edwards zoning hearings where Mr. Lehman testified. So the 500-foot limit was meant to, keep connectivity towards the rivers, and it was meant to mirror the average size of a block. So this area right here is a little different than your normal city block, because as you get closer to the river, it gets wider. So the city block between 23rd and 24th Street is wider than your typical city block. So, then there's also a certain density that we need to make that was very similar to what Edwards had, where just to make the project financially feasible, we have to have a certain level of density. And that's why we're asking for the additional 66 feet.
Okay.
Jackie,
Anyone else from the design team have any comments on top of that? Otherwise, we'll go to the folks in the chat that have raised hands. No? Okay. Quaylen, you have your hand raised. Can we go ahead and you can come off mute and ask your question or questions?
Okay, thank you. I actually have a couple of questions, which is why I thought it would be easier to do it this way. So the railroad will still be running, obviously that's the track that goes there, right? So there'll be regular, okay. I'm sorry.
The railroad behind will still be running. There's a railroad spur. Right. Yeah, that won't.
Yeah, I could point it out.
It won't be there.
Yeah, there's a, right.
Yeah.
This spur will not be there, but this is the tracks below down here.
Right.
I'm kind of sketching on the screen.
That's all right, I got it. Will the apartments be about the same size as those in the glass house, or will they have different sizes? Because I understand the ones in the glass house are kind of small.
I think that they'll be approximately the same size.
Did you say approximately
there's
the
a
same?
range. Yeah, there's a range. There's some very large units in glass house, and then there's going to be some smaller ones. So it'll be similar. There'll be a range of different unit types.
Yeah, do you have that mix? Is there a matrix you could show us of the mix of units? I think that's what she's asking for, right, Quaylen?
Right.
Yeah, we could definitely put that together and send that around.
Okay. And so is there an elevator in this building, or is everything walk up?
There'll be multiple elevators in the building.
Great. Okay. And the pool, I noticed, goes openly right to 23rd. So how do you prevent non-residents from coming in and using that pool?
It looks a lot nicer than Ormsby Pool, I gotta say. So you might get some takers on that.
Well,
it's a good question.
It's a great question. And Dan, I don't know, do you want me to answer that?
So I can answer that. One, we're still working towards that. But we are, our property management team would be highly attuned that there is, normally we have gates there for both code reasons.
Okay, so you were sort of wavering a little bit, but did I hear you say normally you have gates there or something, right?
Yeah, so that's typically the way, but we haven't designed those yet.
Right, and the other two courtyards, one just looks like it's green space, and I'm not quite sure what's in the other. Are those just sort of ornamental pools or something, or haven't you finalized what what's going to happen in those? Are they just?
We haven't finalized those yet. We're still kind of in the early stages of design, but we normally have a variety of different activities depending on what we think tenants will like, as well as the weather, as well as kind of how big those courtyards are.
Okay, I think that was probably most of my questions.
Great.
It's really nice. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you very
Quaylen. I'm going to
Thank
go
you.
next in the queue is Mike Clark.
Hi, guys. Thanks for the presentation. Looks good. I'm an architect as well and a neighbor. Have a few questions for you, just to go through the usual that we talk about on these types of projects. What type of construction are you proposing here? Is it platform, concrete base?
It'll be a podium. It'll be 4 levels of wood frame over one. So, Mike, there'll be at the amenity, we might have to lift up the concrete just to, over the amenity space to get bigger spans. But generally, as you can see in this section, it's all 4 over 1. It's very similar to the glass house.
Okay, fully sprinklered, of course.
Yep.
Okay. Last time we had the last group in, there was a grade change from left to right on this section. I think I want to say it was like 4 to 6 feet along Wharton Street from one end to the other or something like that. How are you guys, you're showing it very linear here, like it's basically tabletop flat. How are you guys handling that grade change that they were showing in solving different?
Yeah, it's very subtle, Mike. I think most of that's going to be taken up in the garage. Obviously, when we get to that residential platform, that podium, we want it to be level because that starts to really mess with accessibility issues and everything else for people living in it. So we would make up any of that grade, with our podium. So it's very subtle along. I mean, you hardly can perceive it when you're on Wharton Street, but there is a slight grade change that runs through there. So, the parking might be a little bit taller at one end versus the other end.
Okay. Around the base, we run into this a lot where the parking is exposed. You just show it as black or very dark. It looks meshed. Maybe it's solid. I'm assuming it needs to be louvered because you're considering under code that it's an open garage, correct, for ventilation?
That's correct. It will be an open garage, and it's a great point. One thing, and maybe Ryan, go to that shot. And we didn't intentionally put trees in front of this, Mike, to not show you that. But as Ryan was mentioning, this is actually walk-up units, so we were careful. And then we have our head house. So when you're coming down the street, we want to see life and activity. And we do need a lot of parking for a building like this. So where we don't have that, and Ryan, I don't know if there's any shots of it, but what we're intentionally doing, Mike, is taking that architecture right down. So we really want to fool the eye into thinking that, it's not going to look like it's just sitting on a podium with a bunch of grates in it. There was a lot of comments in the previous design that they spent a lot of time doing that. And we want to do something similar to that, where there will be scaled openings that, are more residential scaled. Yes, there will be louvers in there because we do want it to be a secure garage. We don't want anybody walking in. But, we'll be careful about it. We'll be careful about how we light it and what you see at the ground level when you're walking by. We're going to spend a lot of time in that because we know that from the previous design, that was a real concern and something that we got to pay attention to, especially here on Wharton Street, which is definitely the more pedestrian focused street. I think, Ryan, if you go to the front shot facing the bridge, just quickly. Yeah, that guy. This here, we're showing.
Yeah, that could have some really nasty spill out, you know what I mean, of lights.
Yep. I think this is going to be something that we're going to end up breaking up. We're a little early now, so we're going to have a grid in there, so it'll feel more like And maybe it's a storefront, and we've done that before on other urban projects where we can screen it. So you're right. It's a good catch on this. It looks like a big black hole, but we're going to spend some time to make it feel like, it could be an amenity space in there or something. And I think landscape too, we want to do a good job with that and how we illuminate it and, make it feel comfortable.
I know on the other project over on Hot Metal Street, we came up with the idea, it was behind the, the government building there, Homeland Security. They were going to bring the wall up because I think you're required by code to have traffic vehicles stopping. So they brought the wall up to 3 feet. So you brought that material up, the brick or whatever you're doing on the exterior, and then you set your louver or something on top, which gave it a little more frame-like, a little reduced opening size. It didn't look so vast, and it wasn't as visible to look through because your louvers, you're, I guess, tilted in a certain way to not allow that light to spill through and create.
That also that little knee wall can also stop headlights from shooting out in the street. So we've done that, and we don't want to do it everywhere because we don't want, like Ryan was saying, like when especially on Wharton Street, we want each of those buildings to have almost their own vocabulary. So we will do different things to screen the cars and the lighting and all that. So, but we hear you. We think it's important, and we don't like that. We really want this to be a building that the residents can walk around, feel comfortable, and the neighborhood, feels comfortable moving around this building,
Okay, that's good. Top of wall, you talked about brick detailing and detailing in general. Something that's missed on some lesser quality housing in the city, I think more so than in our neighborhood, is the parapet condition. When you talk about brick detailing on the Wharton side, right now it just looks like it's straight going up, to utilize that opportunity at the top to do something that's a little less modern and a little more contextual might be appreciated, I think, by us instead of just having flat tops.
I think it's a good point. I think like this guy here and this guy, there can be a little bit of articulation. I think we always are trying to be careful not to like replicate, because this neighborhood has got such beautiful cornices and articulation and brickwork, and we don't want to fake it, but we want to do something that's, of this building, but we hear you. Maybe a little bit more articulation up there would be good.
Yeah, I think so. But that would be great. Trash and recycling is a big deal in our neighborhood. Having space for it internally that's covered and screened and conditioned to smells. Where is that going to be kept? Are there trash chutes in the building that you're going to be collecting and wheeling to one common place?
There are. It's all going to end up here. And that's similar to the previous design. That's exactly where they had their kind of pickup, and we kind of just leaned off of that. It seems like that was probably, it had gotten down the road pretty far, so we thought that was a good place for it. So that's where our move-ins, you can see our elevators down there. So this is a long building, so we're going to have a couple cores, one at the main entry, one here. So residents, wherever you live, whatever courtyard you live in, you can move to this. So that will not only be for move-ins, you can see there's 2 elevators. One will be sized for move-ins. You're moving a couch in, it'll be closed down, but then residents can use the other one. But we also are going to, pay attention to our fire stairs that come down. They're not all shown in here, Mike, but if you know Glass House and you come over the bridge, we used our fire stairs as great ways for the residents to get down and take their dog for a walk. So we want to do that here. It puts less pressure on all those elevators. And we think, nowadays, especially post-COVID, people want to do that. As Ryan mentioned, a lot of our corridors, like we did at Glass House, will have views out to the river. These will actually be day-lit here. So we also have some stairs embedded near those. So we want those to be comfortable. People will take them down to get to their car. They'll take them down to head out for a hike, a walk, take the dog for a walk. That's all important. But back to your question about servicing, we've kept it there. It's all internalized. We've got a generous amount of room, as you can see, because we have a lot of experience with these larger multifamily buildings. You need that, and so we know that, bike storage, we have to size it correctly. Even where the dog washing areas are, all that stuff is pretty important. And those can be cool spaces, that gets people together. So we usually pay attention to how we lay those out.
We're having a big problem in the city in general. I hear from other architects and people who live in some of these buildings that a lot of them don't recycle, even though they're providing room. Are you guys recycling, have an active recycling program? And will you have a recycling and a trash area in this building, or are you having problems with commercial pickup of recyclables?
Dan, I'll let you cover that one.
Yeah, so I'll check with our property management team specifically on the having companies have an issue with recycling. Our standard is to always have 2 chutes, one for trash and one for recycling. And for them to be separated and to have 2 different dumpsters for each and have the company come and take both, and specifically for trash and recycling. So we're pretty cognizant of that, and our renters want that. If you don't offer that, they're upset. Our renters are very focused on environmental issues, and that's one that is very, in our minds, very easy to accomplish. The only other thing on trash as well is I believe we've also added another one kind of right where that curb cut is on Wharton Street, so that our renters don't have to walk all the way to the one side.
Yeah.
Use separate.
Oh, dear, too. Yeah.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. Bike. So with the bike room, are you guys taking advantage of the parking reduction via biking? Could you show the parking matrix sheet once more for us all to talk about for a second? A couple of confusing things on here. So you're saying the parking count was 0.8, but it says 1-to-1 is what the code's requiring. And are you taking the reduction because of the biking, or could you explain this a little more? How many spots you have and so on and so forth?
Sure, that's a maximum. Is the from zoning is 1-to-1.
Yeah.
So we aren't hitting the maximum. We aren't changing or asking for a variance or using any bike parking to reduce that. It's merely that you at a maximum you have to have 1-to-1. So we are at anywhere from 0.8 to 0.85. We're still working on finalizing that garage.
Okay, so I think, this for us, I know the purpose of the RIV has many facets, but one of them was to reduce the amount of parking being provided as sort of an incentive and a realization that, the cars are, less people are driving and so on and so forth. But that works for, I think, other cities right now. I think we're still more of a 1-to-1. I think it's a great aspirational place we're heading. But what I think this is doing, and I think, the neighbors and the neighborhood should consider here, is that you're offering 365 to 75 units, but only 280 to 90 parking spots. So technically we're about 80 units short, 80 parking spots short, if everyone was to have a 1-to-1 car. And if none of those units had 2 people that had 2 cars, which already creates a problem in that matrix itself. So and on-street parking you've included here, but is that not going to be part of the RPP system, or is that you're imagining that's being free street parking? So I guess 2 questions there. How many units, how many parking spots will you be short? Because there's kind of a range here. Is that because unit mixes is changing? And then how did you guys view the on-street parking? Is that viewed as yours just around your building, or is it going to be given over to the permit parking, or is it just free game for anyone?
Yeah, no, thank you for the question. So for the unit count, we're still working on kind of exactly what that unit matrix is, as well as, exactly what that parking count is. We're always trying to optimize our parking lots as much as possible. So trying to finalize that to get a final count. But we think that this represents kind of approximately where we would end up, anywhere from 365 to 375 units, and for 280 and 290 on off-street parking spots. In terms of the on-street parking, I think we're working with Domi to kind of figure out exactly what that would be, but we haven't made a determination if that would be handed over or it would be free on-street.
I missed your last comment there, Dan. Sorry, you faded off on me.
Oh, sorry. I said we're working with Domi to figure out exactly kind of how that on-street parking would work.
Okay, so guest parking then? I guess you don't have guest parking?
So normally what we do is there's kind of a couple spots for guests and potential lessees or tenants kind of close to the lobby entrance. Normally what we try to do is keep that on street and park them kind of directly in front of the lobby. That's typically what we try to do. And guest passes are managed normally by the residents with property.
Okay. I'll let other neighbors closer talk further about that, but that's just it's a concern because that puts a larger, with less. Somebody's not muted, sorry, cell phone. You're in an area that doesn't have a lot of public parking. So any spillover shortcomings is going to be absorbed by the neighbors and their street parking directly around you. So I see there being stress there between the new development and the existing neighbors. I'll let them ask further questions, but let's talk about rooftop equipment. Are you going to do the wall pack units where they're in the walls, or are you going to be putting condensing units on the roof to add to the height of this building as is? Chris, I guess, would answer that. Is that?
You say it one more time?
The roof, are you using rooftop units as your mechanical solution, or are you using?
Yeah, so typically that'll be a split system. It'll run, just above the corridor, similar to you've seen in other projects like this. So it'll be set back from the street 30 or so feet, and they're small, compressor units that'll be set, just in a row, following basically the corridors of the building.
So I guess what the neighbors and I think myself and our friends up on the slopes are not going to like is if they're large, like city mutual systems where they're sitting 7 or 8 feet tall. If these are the 2-3 foot units sitting on a small curb, I think that's what we're,
that's what we're. The only example I could give you is if you went up the incline and looked down on Glass House, you'd see that they're very small. They kind of disappear up there. They're kind of dots from a distance, but yeah, we'll make sure that we keep as low profile as we can with those, but you'll be very hard to see those.
And then signage, are you looking for any variance for signage? You're not planning anything large. We've very we're very conscious about signage on the south side, and if you had something like a 30-foot long sign plan for the end of the building facing Birmingham Bridge, I guess now would be a great time to mention it. But something that meets the standards in zoning, or will you be coming back for variance for that?
I don't think we intend to, Dan. We haven't really talked about it. Sean, you want to cover that one?
Yeah, no, I mean, signage isn't proposed at this time, and we really haven't considered it. So that would be separate.
Okay. And the last two things I wanted to talk about was on the last project, there was a fair amount of conversation around the traffic that this would add to this quadrant of the south side. And there was a lot of consternation and concern by the neighbors, and myself included, who use this area to visit friends and such, that adding 300 something vehicles around rush hour, even other times of the day, it's going to be a lot busier. And now that you are limited on the 23rd Street as you approach the bridge heading south, you can only turn right. You can't go straight through anymore. And 24th, while it has a turning light, it's still very backed up because of traffic coming from the south hitting Carson trying to turn on. I'm a little concerned, and I think some neighbors have voiced to me as well that they're concerned about the added traffic. And wanted to know, are you guys going to do another traffic study with your project as the model? Have you talked about other solutions? One thing we talked about was opening up that bike route underneath the Birmingham Bridge to reconnect to the other grid as another outlet to keep moving traffic through the neighborhood. Is that something you and Domi have talked about?
Chris, or
Yeah, no, this is Chris. I'm here. So, I mean, from a transportation perspective, I actually love this project. I love the location. I think we're connecting the community towards the river, encouraging vibrancy, life, activity. It's an extremely walkable community. Lots of nearby amenities, including employment, shopping, grocery, restaurants, entertainment. I mean, and all of these things add up to what? Less vehicle dependency. And that's the goal. That's the goal at the city. That's the goal at the RIV district. That's what we're shooting for here. In terms of the actual traffic volume impact, we are in close discussions with DOMI, working with them, weekly basis now to have conversations with them. Our trips do not trigger the need for a traffic impact study. We are below that threshold. So as part of that, we are working with DOMI to produce a transportation memorandum. The primary part of that transportation memorandum is to talk about the multimodal activities and the amenities that we're going to be providing and encouraging non-single occupancy vehicle use. So that's where we're continuing to work with DOMI. Like I said, traffic impact study is not required, but we continue to work with them to give them everything they need to make sure that we're covering all bases of how this impacts the surrounding neighborhood network. Now, again, I will say that the 837 project, the improvements that happened on Carson Street, I think that they've overall in that area have had a major impact, a major positive impact. I think everyone was aware that the 23rd Street intersection, while previously a full movement intersection, did have significant concerns, with its close proximity to the Birmingham Bridge. Definitely had some backups between there too. A lot of confusion with people trying to turn on and off of that street, and it caused a lot of problems. Now with the 24th Street intersection that they added the protected permitted left turn phasing, including, which I'm a big fan of, the flashing yellow arrow, which I think is more easily understandable from a driver standpoint for how and when you can turn. They've added that. We've talked to DOMI. We feel that that intersection with its improvements has good capacity to handle the number of trips we're talking about. And again, in terms of trips, we're talking about, I'd say less than 70 trips directional. That means not entering or exiting, but a directional trip. So in the morning, those trips are leaving the area. And in the PM, they will be entering, which means most likely in the PM, they're going to be using 24th Street. But again, with working with the city, with working with those signal plans that they have provided for 24th Street, we see a capacity in there that can handle the traffic volumes that we're projecting for this site.
Well, I hear what you're saying. I know that I drive this route. I come down Sarah from the city side, from the left, and I turn left onto 24th and then left back onto Carson to get across the Birmingham Bridge. I do that anywhere from 8 o'clock to 8:45 in the morning. And that little strip of 24th Street between Sarah and Carson is backed up solid, and each way at least 2 cars, no matter what time in that 45 minutes I address that intersection. And a lot of it is because what's coming at me from the riverside is backed up as well. And this is only going to add to that, no doubt. And they've clearly not addressed that in their new timing and in the modeling that's going on Carson Street, even though we did mention it a fair amount, and that this project or something like it would be coming. So I think the neighbors are gonna, I don't know if we should be involved with that conversation with DOMI because they're not getting it, or they're just not getting the right numbers, or they're not putting it together correctly. But I can tell you right now, as it sits without you guys, it's not functioning very well. A lot of neighbors are pissed about it. So I think more work has to be done there. I think the conversation should really be opened up again about making the neighborhood bike route through underneath the Birmingham Bridge an opening again and connecting it so there's another way out of the neighborhood out of that quadrant.
Are you saying the neighborhood bike route? You're not talking about automobiles?
I'm talking about making it Wharton Street go underneath the bridge. And
okay, so opening it up to all traffic, not just bicycles.
Correct.
Okay, so yeah, that would be a long-term conversation to have with DOMI. Obviously, they've made the improvements by making the accommodations for that bicycle connection, which I think everyone would agree, which is a major improvement over what was there before. In terms of what happens along Carson Street, everything that's happened on Carson Street with the safety improvement project, which extends multiple blocks along Carson Street, it's all new. when you put something in like this new, in terms of like adding new signal phases at an intersection, perhaps, protected permitted phasing, which is here, these things, you implement them, you collect data, you review it, you make adjustments. That's what happens with any new signal or any modification to a signal. So it's my opinion that the city will continue to review those, collect the data, and analyze it to find out what signal timings, what splits are appropriate for that. But I will say that the addition of the protected permitted left turns, which did not exist before, is a huge improvement, which allows much more cars the opportunity to turn onto and off of those side streets. So there's significant strides being made right now to improve that. And same thing with the turn restrictions at 23rd Street. That's getting rid of a lot of congestion problems at that location that used to wrap up with the Birmingham Bridge. So strides are being made in the right direction. DOMI has agreed that the anticipated peak hour trips for this site are going to be accommodated within that system. And we're going to continue to work with them, and whatever they ask of us, we'll make sure we work with them and provide it.
Okay, we'll continue that conversation. I think that's going to be a multifaceted conversation, I feel. So my last comment, and then I'll let other people speak up, is that stepping back years, the changing of the zoning from urban industrial to RIV, as you've pointed out, was to bring the development and the neighborhood closer to the river and the trail, but also it's a trade-off. We're giving away this to get that. And one of them was to help build up a more robust riverfront facade to the neighborhood and the communities that the RIV is participating in. When I look at this from the trail, and by the way, I'm Mr. Trail on the south side, I take care of them, maintain them, clean them, advocate for them, you name it. I'm spent a lot of time down there. I don't see what benefit I'm getting as a community member from this project being up against our trail. I was really hoping that you'd come in with, you're going to beautify it. So as I'm riding by, I'd have a much nicer thing to look at ground level. There's a lot of overgrown shrub and just junk and garbage. I was hoping for a decorative fence or something. I was hoping for a lot of things that I could come up with, if I was spending money that I don't have. But it looks like just a lawn, a fire access driveway, and some trees. I was very disappointed actually when I saw the project, because one of these projects, whether it's yours or another one of these, what the neighborhood, we've heard from a lot of people, is we need more ways to get to the river, and nobody's proposing this. Nobody's giving us this, which is, extend 24th Street over the railway. Give us a pedestrian bike bridge to connect to our trail. We can only get on at 18th and 24th. And then way down at 9th was closed, so now it's down at 4th. We don't have the access. You want to say that you're offering your residents use of it, but you're telling them to go walk 5 blocks or 8 blocks the other way to get to it. I think the project should offer us as one of their, hey, we'd like to get an extra 66 feet and maybe 40 extra units, but we're going to build you a bridge over, to connect us and this neighborhood that we're being part of to the trail. Give the residents access directly from this end of the neighborhood. Something more like that, instead of, it's a very development centric development, I guess. Your guys are right within your box. And I wanted to see you guys, if you're going to be building up on a river, to spread out and help us with sort of fixing and beautifying our trail and our riverfront edge. So you got the building portion, but that's not benefiting us as a community. I wanted to see more out and beyond. So that's my statement. That's my my carrot. Hopefully you guys can see what I'm talking about and I don't know, offer some solutions. So thank you.
We'll definitely look into that. I appreciate all the feedback, and we'll definitely work with DOMI as well to relay all of your concerns and work with them on ways that we can do our best to alleviate the traffic, as well as, we're happy to be conduits of the concerns in terms of.
Good evening. Can I ask a question, please?
Sure.
Jennifer,
Dan, can you just want to finish up your statement and then we'll go to the caller?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay,
I appreciate it, Mike.
thanks. Caller with the last four numbers, 7804. Can you introduce yourself and we'll take your questions?
Sure. I'm Ron Turquinio. I'm the owner of River Park Commons, which is across the street. River Park Commons 1, River Park Commons 3, which is across the street on Wharton, and the parking lot on 23rd Street. So I surround this property on three sides. I'm excited about your project. I welcome it. I applaud it. It's exciting. Okay, it's needed down there. My question relates to, and I've been here for 22 years now, to 24th Street. Okay, the challenge with 24th Street is not necessarily the access to Carson, but there's cars parked on both sides of the street. So only one car at a time can transverse it. So if you're coming out, you've got to wait for the other car to come down before the other car can go up. And it's manageable now, but it's not great. And I don't know if Domi's paying attention to that, but 22 years after leaving the project every day, it is an issue. I don't know the solution to it, but the fact that there's cars parked on both sides of the street, and that you really only have one lane of traffic coming in and coming out, make it difficult. And also on 24th Street, my building, River Park Commons 1, welcomes a lot of trucks. So they need to be able to come down that street and make their turn into the rear of the building. That's my major concern. I welcome you. I can't wait till you start, but I don't have a solution for that issue. And I was wondering if a solution come up with, because if you don't, we are going to have a major problem. Thank you.
Thanks, Ron. Does anyone from the team want to take that question?
Thanks, Ron. I think we have definitely noted that, and I'll work with our traffic engineers to think of if we can find any solutions to that issue.
As much as I want to see you there, and I do want to see you there, because having those warehouse buildings creates a lot of problems for the property down there with the homeless and people drag racing. And obviously, if you're there, that will be populated, and it's the last piece from the Birmingham Bridge over to redevelop that neighborhood. But you need to figure a way to get the cars. I mean, you just can't say we're going to look at it, because it'll be a fight. It'll be a fight with the residents, and because it's an issue, it is something that will create a problem. And I think if we sit down and think about it, we'll figure a solution. But we just can't say, yeah, we're going to do it and hope to get through Domi and city planning. I don't think that that's going to happen. So I appreciate that, and I really can't wait till you get started. And if I can be of any assistance to you, I'm here for you.
Thanks, Ron.
Thank you.
Thanks. I'm going to go to the next person in the queue with their hand raised. It's Greg Brisky. Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, hi, good evening. Thanks for the presentation. Mike Clark, I think, stole most of the thunder of what I was going to share, but it was specifically concerns around the access. And I guess just my piece, and I'd like to make sure others have the opportunity. So I'm a resident and a property manager. I'm very, very familiar with that block. And I guess I was surprised to hear that the changes here, the impact are it sounded like exempt from a traffic study. That is a deep and founded concern of mine and a number of other residents. And if there is conversation in cooperation with Domi, I hope that there's some opportunity for residents to give some testimony as to the current state, let alone in an increased impact and usage of that area. But yeah, it's a very captive block. And I mean, frankly, as far as this evening's presentation is concerned, a lot of very attractive, very positive things. But I feel that the traffic impact is either underestimated or being understated. and relative to existing infrastructure. And yeah, just simply people getting in and out of there. And I've discussed this with a number of neighbors. I want to see development there. I want to see change, but I want to make sure we've done it responsibly. This not only concerns us, but also the new people, the new neighbors we're welcoming to the community. We don't want that to be considered to be a downgrade to the neighborhood. So yeah, just adding on to what's already been said by Mike, and then also just now by Ron.
Thanks, Greg.
Thank you.
Okay, the next person we have with their hand raised in the queue is Matt Brungo.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for presenting. I'll try to be brief as well. I'm also an attorney. I advise the community council and on occasion represent them if they request it. My questions are mainly about zoning. This is RIV-IMU. Is that the base zoning district?
That is correct.
And just, we haven't dealt with that many projects in the RIV since its inception. I remember reviewing it when it was drafted. This fits under the ceiling, but aren't there also opportunities to push the ceiling higher than the current design is showing?
There are, yes. If you get bonus points, you can go above, but we're not going higher.
No, and that's fine. I just, as I look at it, in terms of your density and the parking here is anywhere from half a spot per unit to 1 spot per unit. Is that the requirement?
Yes, it's half of, yes, 0.5.
Yeah, so 0.5 to 1. Is the only thing about this that doesn't fit into the zoning envelope for the RIV-IMU the extra 66 feet in east to west direction?
That is correct.
Okay. And I'm just asking, like, I'm not asking you to do it. I'm just, if you were to add another floor on a portion and pull back the 60 feet, would it be possible to keep the same density of units with less parking and fit entirely within the RIV envelope?
I don't believe so. I mean, that's not something that I think that we can, it would cause problems, I believe. And I
Okay.
just had to look at the step back. No, I mean, this is substantially, I mean, it's almost identical to what Edwards went through. So, and really the zoning hasn't changed that much between the two, and that the RIV overlay district was in place when Edwards was approved. And that was, the precursor to what we're dealing with now.
Okay. And just, I guess my last question, it's caused by the fact that 24th Street is on a slightly different grid than 23rd.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Other than that, I just had, with the on-street parking, I don't know. Mike had asked a question about the RPP. The other question is, would it get folded into the parking improvement district, similar to what happened between 20th and 21st on Jane Street? I just don't know the answer. And then my last comment is just a comment with the west entrance to that common space. I do think long-term is probably going to be advisable to have some type of gatekeeping function. Just if that's completely open to the public, I could envision a lot of undesirable traffic being attracted to that location.
We appreciate that. We will definitely have a gate. It's just a matter of we haven't designed what exactly that looks like, because we do want the feeling of it. We want residents to feel like they can use it and go down, and that it's not this enormous kind of gate. So we're still working on exactly what that looks like, but there will be a gate for security reasons. You would need that for code reasons for the pool anyway, so that little kids don't run up there, for instance. So we will have a gate there.
All right. Well, thanks for the presentation. I appreciate the time you put into it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. We're going to go to the next individual in the queue with their hand raised, which is Deborah Thompson. Deborah?
Yes, good morning. Thank you. Good evening, I mean. Thank you for the lovely presentation. We are single family homeowners that have lived in over here since the mid-90s. And we have deep concerns about the traffic and the parking. Mike and Ron brought great points up about 24th Street. We use these blocks daily. It's already congested. And the other thing is 25th and 24th Street with parking permits. The area is permitted, so there's minimal off-street parking available for people who don't have a residential permit. And the parking that's dual on 24th Street is apartment residence. And frequently when I come home, you can't turn into our parking space without waiting for another car. It's already risky and very tedious. So I want to echo our concerns about the parking and traffic flow. Cars, and the other thing, when you look at the traffic house patterns, it's going to go directly past our house. And there's already a ton of traffic. People speed down Sydney Street. They use it as a cut through. So traffic and parking is a deep concern. The other thing that I'm interested, who's your target market for tenants?
So we target a variety of different people. It all depends on kind of unit type. We have all different types of units here, but we see kind of anywhere from kind of 25-year-olds to kind of 45-year-olds is normally the target market for these types of projects.
Okay, because we don't really need any more college students living over here in group projects so they can afford the rent. We have a very quiet residential neighborhood right behind you. And the other thing, I'm very impressed with your giving people views, but one of our big objections, and particularly to the other person who wanted to extend the building height, we have unobstructed views across to the other side of the city. Your building takes away all our views of nature, the river, and that is less than desirable to us. We understand the need for growth, and you as a group are much more user-friendly than the prior people, but it is of deep concern to us because we like looking out our windows. People have decks on this block of Sydney Street they use, and your building will obstruct our neighborly views to give your neighbors a better view than we have.
Appreciate your comments, Deborah. And just on the college student and the group housing, I just want to reassure you that this is not student housing. It is not designed for student housing. We have a whole student housing division within Greystar, and they're not a part of this. So just want to reassuage your concerns on that.
Well, now if you could just drop your building down to give us a better view, that would be great. Just make a little carve out for us.
Understood.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah.
Great. Thanks, Deborah. Next person in the queue is Barb Rudiak.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to share what I recall from the work that we did previously with Edwards Communities regarding residential permit parking, because we did spend a lot of time talking about that. And there was an agreement that was made with Edwards Community, and it was put in writing that the units would never be able to be considered for residential permit parking. Now, I think that in the guidelines, a complex like this cannot be part of residential permit parking, but they were agreeable to just put it in writing for us. And I think Mike may have asked about signage for residential permit parking on South 23rd and South 24th. Being that the complex is on those blocks, it would not be considered residential permit parking. So signs could not go up for that. But again, I'm hearing about South 24th and how problematic it is because there is parking on both sides. And that is probably the reason. And it's because it's not listed as it's not part of the RPP. So I just wanted to make that clear that it would not be eligible for residential permit parking.
Thanks, Barb. And we, the letter that we provided and was made part of the conditions to the Edwards approval that we would be willing to do the exact same thing as we did before.
Thank you.
Edwards did before.
Thank you. Barb, is that all?
Yes.
Thanks. Next person in the queue with their hand raised is Rick Ekstrom.
Hi, yeah, my name is Rick Ekstrom, and I'm an advocate for high-performing, low-energy buildings. So with so many units, seems to me this is a great opportunity to reduce the carbon use in our buildings in Pittsburgh. And I don't know Greystar's position on this. Are you seeking any sort of beyond code energy use standards?
So we haven't finalized that yet. I'm pretty confident that we will not be seeking LEED on this, but there are a variety of different ones that we've gotten that we've pursued for other projects like Green Globes that we would explore, or Fitwell is another one that we would explore for this building, but we haven't gotten to that point yet.
Yeah, I'm not advocating LEED, although I am a LEED AP. But Passive House is a standard that I think is an opportunity to be a leader in Pittsburgh, and not necessarily even pursuing certification, but pursuing that kind of level of low energy performance. Particularly with COVID, you can have a high ventilation rate. You can have a really healthy, long lasting building with looking at a standard like that. So I know it's early in your design process, but I just wanted to plant that seed. With so many units, I don't think you'd pay much of a higher development cost to come up with something that could really be high performing.
Now, appreciate the comment, and we work with HCM. To your point, the more high performing the building, the better it is for tenants, the better it is for the owners who own it for a long period of time, and it's better for operations in terms of reducing your utility costs. So we'll work to kind of make this as high performance as we can, and we'll look at. I appreciate the Passive House comment. We'll, to your point of, sometimes there are certain things within those requirements that if you just don't do the one thing, then you don't get the requirement. But there are other things that you could add or put into the building that help increase the performance without necessarily getting the certificate. So appreciate that.
Thanks. It sounds like you get what I'm talking about.
Thank you, Rick.
Thanks, Rick. We have another hand raised in the chat. Anthony Lucas, if you want to come off mute and ask your question.
Sure. Thank you so much, Jackie. I appreciate it. And thanks for everybody's tonight for the time this evening to learn a little bit more about the project. Similar to Deborah and similar to Greg, I'm also a resident here in the 2400 block of Sydney Street. And I do want to continue to make the emphasis on a few different points that my good neighbors here have already made, but I think is continued to worth just keep mentioning here is in regards to the current parking situation. I think, one of the pieces that I would just say, I think particularly moving from a from a pre-COVID world to a post-COVID world, that more people are more amped not only to we find that most people here are still staying at home. We see more cars are residing on the streets, and therefore we do see that there's more limited options that are available for individuals who are residents here in this neighborhood. I was chuckling a bit because your target market is within the age range that I fall into, and I was fortunate enough to purchase a home in this neighborhood because it is quiet. It has really neighborly people, and I think the idea of what you're looking to do, I think, is a good thought. However, I will say that I do think that there has to be extra consideration in relation to the traffic, that congestion. I will say, as somebody who has to come down 24th anytime I want to come home, that is truly the only ins and outs. And not only are you competing with residents, but I also live next to a studio that often will have events here on the weekends, which now puts more additional competition in addition to what you're proposing for finding available parking when I want to come home from an evening out. And because as far from what I've heard, nobody here has really opened the opportunity for us to take advantage of the different parking that's going to be available to your residents or the businesses that are in existence here. I will tell you that there's many of us who I think would be open to those conversations if folks were more willing to open up those doors to have those individuals who currently rely on street parking to take advantage of some of those opportunities. An example that I just want to point out, and just in general, is that our parking enforcement, which I know I have had the opportunity to sit on some of the Southwatch meetings, that Barbara, that I know you're really great at facilitating for us. But I am concerned that some of that enforcement is already so low, and that this additional piece is just going to make it more of a frustrating situation, and understanding how the city's going to enforce that parking, particularly for the residents like me who do not have a garage, who do not have a landing pad, that truly depend on these open areas of parking. And I think that's one of the pieces that a lot of people like about this part of the neighborhood, is that this is a part of the South Side that often will have a little bit of that opportunity because it is in that nestled part. But this development could create a situation when those guests do come by and happen to take the spot that's available in front of my home without any repercussion. So I think that's something to be very, very thoughtful about, because I'm very familiar that this is a perfect age range that's going to be really geared to enjoying this part of the life, right? I mean, part of this piece of living in this neighborhood in the South Side is that it has that nightlife feel, it has that city appeal. That's one of the reasons why I'm making this very much so my home and in the grand scheme of things. So I definitely want to re-emphasize those concerns that others have mentioned. But again, just from another neighborhood perspective and somebody who's in your demographic age range, is to please be mindful of that. We appreciate that quiet that we currently have. I do think one of the pieces, as we think about some of that enforcement around the parking, that item for consideration, given that the new residences are coming here, is to potentially extend the RPP from Sydney Street all the way up from 23rd to East Carson going south. Currently, that one right side across from the city vets is actually only, to my knowledge, is only for metered parking. It is not available to the RPP or permit parking KK area, which seems very off to me. I think that would be an opportunity to also provide a little bit more opportunity for those of us who are residents to have that access. One question I did have, and I apologize because I don't know if it was truly mentioned at this point, but can somebody talk a little bit about, for me, about the projected timelines of, because I'm assuming at this point you have to have at least some idea of when construction would be planned and when this would actually be like a live project and what that looks like a little bit more. Somebody can speak to that, please.
Sure. Thanks for the comments on parking and kind of the nuance of the meter versus the residential permit parking. In terms of timeline, I think what we're looking to do ideally would be starting construction late in 2023, and we anticipate it would take about 20 to 22 months to finalize construction and have residents with it. So that would be kind of late 2025 is when residents would start.
I am so sorry, Dan. You are so faint on my end. Maybe that's my computer.
Sorry, but maybe I'll be a little loud. Can you hear me better, Anthony?
Yes, you're projecting much louder. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm not a little under the weather, so that might be it. So we plan on starting construction if kind of all the timelines hold up in late 2023, and we anticipate it would be about 20 to 22 months to have residents be moving in and construction be finalized. And so that would be late 2025 when construction would be completed.
Great, thank you so much, Sean. Appreciate that.
Along those notes around kind of timelines, I know Sean mentioned in addition to the needing to go to zoning board of adjustment for the building length variance, just wanted to give you the opportunity to share a little more about your process with planning commission. I know you'll need to go to that given the RIV and the plan development project or project development plans.
Yes.
Yeah, that I did want to talk about that just a little bit. And Thomas, I was looking for my notes when you and I talked about this in relation to the dam, and I can't find them. So I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit.
So, I mean, I can speak to that. We are working on our project development plan, the design review, that entire package. This is what we do not have a date scheduled yet for the zoning board of adjustment. We're hopeful to get one scheduled in early January if possible. So we'll be following up with the city after this to get to that point. And then once we get through the zoning board of adjustment, we'll probably be a couple months later going before the planning commission.
Right. So as part of this dam, you're here for the variance. And so our response would be in our rebuttal or to this in some way, shape, or form would be in response to that variance.
Yes. Sorry, just and I should explain this a little bit better at the beginning, because I just went through the maximum at the furthest points. We're not asking for it's pretty apparent from the what we're viewing right now. It's not 66 feet the entire width. It's when you get to Wharton Street, the length is 538 feet. So it's just that limited portion, but that is the variance that we're asking for.
So 38 feet.
No, it's 66 feet.
Sorry.
I mean,
okay.
Yeah, I'm just saying it's not, if you go back to the Edwards photo comparison, that was, more rectangular in shape. So what the 500 feet was straight down, where ours is a little bit angled. It's 566 feet. It's 560 feet at the ground floor. But because of those terraces that we saw in the renderings, they extend out above, and that's what's 566 feet from 23rd to 24th at its longest point.
Okay. So as part of the dam process, the folks that attended here tonight or watched this video afterwards will have 30 days to respond back to what they see. And we as a community council, we try to facilitate that. If people want to send their comments to us, we gather it up and package that up neatly to go to send to zoning, and they of course go with Thomas's notes. But I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Thomas, even though a project development plan would technically come to a dam meeting, would they need to come back, or this is considered their one and only dam meeting? And I'm only bringing it up because once this project, if it makes it past zoning, I think the community is going to want to be fairly engaged in this going forward. And so if there's not a subsequent dam required, would want to work closely with Greystar to sort of be hand in hand with you on your next steps and what you would present to planning. So we do have that sort of buy-in by the community.
Yes. So that's a really good point. We would be happy to come back before the planning commission. We did that, or I should say Edwards did that the last time, came to before the variance and also came back before this council, before planning commission. Things just process got a little bit changed when the when the RCO ordinance was passed and codified, and it's like, okay, you have to only come before this meeting. So, I don't think that's an issue.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you both. Yeah, and I think that was the main thing. As I said, we would encourage that, and so grateful for your openness to do that as well. From the city side, we encourage that ongoing engagement with the RCO process. There's as long as there's not like substantial modification or substantial new additions to what you shared tonight, it doesn't require you to come back for a second dam. But we, there are cases where it could be required a second dam if there were those kind of things I mentioned of substantial changes. But in any case, we definitely encourage you to do what you're planning to do to come back before planning commission. So
thank you.
Formal meeting. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Thomas.
But just to recap, I mean, this is it's almost identical dimensionally, impact wise to the project that was previously approved. And we're happy that we can get this project off and viable again. So we thank you for your time and hope for a recommendation. And Barbara, Jackie, if there are questions, comments, please feel free to reach out and let us know.
Okay, I think Barb has her hand raised in the queue right now. Go ahead, Barb.
There were some questions in the chat that may be able to be answered. One was, and I think, Sean, we were talking about this before the meeting about the number of apartment buildings, and I would say then apartments that are in Southside City. Samara Road is building a complex at Southside Works. And has Greystar done research to determine the need for apartments like this? So that's, and the question was, are we saturated with apartment units?
Thanks, Barbara, and thanks for the question. We haven't we haven't engaged a third party to do a formal analysis, but as part of kind of all of our analysis during kind of the preliminary phases, we review the demands and the supply for every market that we're going to enter. And in this market and in Pittsburgh generally, but also Southside specifically, there's significant housing demand. When you look at apartments in Pittsburgh, one of the things that has caught our eye is that there's very little vacancy. There's normally what we see in most markets is a 5% vacancy in apartment buildings, and in here most buildings are 2 to 3% vacant. So we still see kind of significant demand in Pittsburgh generally and in Southside specifically, given, I think it was Anthony who noted all of the amenities, and not just the amenities from on East Carson Street, which there are many, but also the amenities of the trail, of the bikeways and the bike routes that we will connect to, and that we believe our tenants will use. And we also are seeing more and more tenants kind of work from home, which does alleviate some of those traffic concerns. And they leave at different times than people who don't necessarily work from home.
And I do recall, as you're talking, I was thinking back with Edwards Communities, and they had mentioned that in the places where they had built the apartment buildings, the single family, the housing around the facilities actually got probably became updated. We have a lot of as Deb mentioned, a lot of student housing, and they probably are not they may not be as well maintained as those of us who live in our homes. And they were finding that because there was the kind of competition that these apartment buildings provide, some of the housing actually became, there was considerable renovation. I don't know whether that would happen here, but that was something that they had mentioned. Another comment or question was, has there been any feedback on the Glass House complex and how has that worked out? The person said that the area is quite different and there's a large parking lot and less traffic concerns.
I don't know if Chris is still on. Oh, there, yeah, you're still on.
Yeah, I don't know, it's as the architects, I don't know exactly. I just know what you said, Barbara, that very different, that is a massive parking lot behind it. It's the same kind of podium of parking underneath it, one level of podium, very similar to this job, but you're right, it's very different. The street structure is not as dense as this, over there, but I know it's leased up well, if that's the question. It's done very well in terms of its leasing. So I think this demand, and we've looked at several sites in Pittsburgh, and it is, kind of having a residential boom right now.
How is the parking handled there? Do people pay extra for these parking spots?
Yeah, at that project, again, different developer, but they do, it's structured parking, it's underneath. It's actually in a
I think
over there, so that was able to get the parking or get the build. Oh, do you hear me? Yeah, that I was just saying that was in a floodplain, that project. I'm gonna turn my video off. So that is a little bit different, but they do pay for that parking.
And Dan, that would be the same situation here as well. I see you shaking your head. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
And just to add on one point, whenever we kind of look to develop in a community, these concerns about traffic and parking are something that we confront every day, and we always try to take the balance that there's always kind of on one hand, neighbors don't want more traffic, which we understand, and on the other hand, they want more parking in our apartments, and so we always try to balance. The more cars that we're able to put in our building, the more traffic there's likely to be. So we always are trying to balance that, as well as what the market demands from the tenants in terms of parking. What we've seen more and more on our communities, and what we are building to, because we're taking the risk if we don't provide the parking that the tenants will rent our apartments. What we see is that more and more tenants don't want the parking. They don't want to pay the extra expense, and they're willing to take Ubers, they're willing to take the bus, they're willing to ride their bike, or they work from home and they're choosing a location where they have that ability to do all those things without a car. And we love this location because we really do believe that tenants have that ability to access a number of different amenities, especially at a grocery, which is important, without taking it.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of walkable amenities in this neighborhood for sure. I just have one other question. Are any units considered affordable housing?
They are not at this time.
Okay.
There's no kind of designated affordable units. What we try to do is offer a variety of sizes, so that people who are looking for a lower, kind of what we call check right on a monthly basis have some options.
Right, because there is no requirement in this district for that, correct?
Correct.
No overlay? Okay, thanks. Just making sure everyone on the phone realizes that. Okay. I think we went through everything on the chat. Does anyone on the Zoom meeting or on the phone have any other questions? And if not, we can go ahead and wrap this up. Zach, your hand's raised.
Yeah, hi, I'm Zach. I'm a neighbor. I just had a question about the parking as well. So you mentioned that they would have to pay for parking. Would these residents have the ability to apply for residential parking and park on the street?
No.
No.
Okay. Thank you.
And sorry. This is what I was referring to in response to Barbara's one question. Edwards Communities agreed that it would limit or not join any residential permit parking program, and we would, Greystar would honor and paper and document that as well as any condition to approval.
Thanks.
Okay. Anthony just put in the chat, to Zach's point, they might not be able to apply for RPP, but I'm concerned that this will not be enforced effectively, especially on evenings and weekends.
And we continue to work on that. So by the time this is built, maybe we will have strong enforcement all throughout the South Side. And we continue to work on that every single month when we talk with the parking authority.
Yep. Zach, your hand is still raised. Do you have another question?
No, sorry.
Okay, great. All right. Does anyone else on the Zoom have any other questions or comments?
Mike was asking about the price range for apartments. Mike McKay.
Sure. So the price range is, we have, what I always say is we have what we would like people to pay, but ultimately kind of the market bears that out. And it all depends on kind of the unit type. But kind of our general expectations is kind of for smaller units, they'd be in the kind of mid to upper 1,000, so anywhere from 1,500 to 1,800, let's say. And then it goes all the way up for kind of the largest 2 bedrooms would be anywhere from 2,800 to $3,000.
Okay, thanks, Dan.
And Nolan has a raised hand, I believe.
Yeah, hi. Also a neighbor here. I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this question after, sitting through this, but these are all strictly apartment rentals. There are no condos for purchase, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so it wouldn't be, somebody coming in, buying this and staying there long term. Is it going to be like a standard 1-year lease, or is that something that has to be worked out later?
So normally our property management team offers a variety of leases. Normally it's anywhere from 6 months to 15 months. Sometimes they go longer, but very rarely. And those are, it all depends kind of on pricing and what the tenant wants.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that was my question. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you, Noah.
That is a good question or good point. Do you do short-term? Do you have a arm of your development that does short-term rental with Airbnb? And does it happen now in Glasshouse? And will you be doing something like that here?
So just to be clear, we didn't own or develop Glasshouse. The architecture team
Gotcha.
was the architect on Glasshouse. We do not. I had not done any Airbnb. We do not do that. Normally, there's usually 1 or 2 units for that are held as guest suites for people who live in the building. So let's say it's Thanksgiving and your parents want to visit you, but you live in a studio and you don't necessarily want them to be living with you the whole weekend. You can have a guest suite and they can go and be in there. We do not plan on doing any short-term stay or Airbnb component whatsoever, other than probably 1 or 2 guest suites.
Okay, thank you.
Anthony, you have your hand raised again.
I do.
If you wanna-
Thanks, Jack. Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you, Jackie. Just a quick question regarding the staff and security that is expected to come with the unit. Can somebody talk a little bit about the expectation of the property manager? Will the property manager be required to live on that property? And will there be some kind of third-party security or maybe hired from the department to who will be like walking around and monitoring the property?
Sure. So we do not require our property managers to live on site. We have people on site normally 24 hours a day. We do offer a discount for our property management team to live on site, and therefore normally one or two of them do. It's in terms of security, we go through an extensive security plan with our property management team. Go through on a door-by-door basis exactly what's open, what's not open, who has access, and we go through that multiple times to ensure that the building is secure. And then at a property level basis, the property manager decides kind of what level of security, whether they hire someone to come around, what time they come around. On a lot of properties, especially ones in kind of a city environment like this, we do have someone that we hire to do some kind of security in terms of walking around the site at night. But that we're kind of very far away from kind of making those decisions. But that is typical. And Greystar manages properties, all around the world, but they already manage multiple properties here in Pittsburgh, so they're very familiar with kind of what is standard and what is required to make tenants feel safe and comfortable.
Thanks, Dan. Actually, as a follow-up to that question regarding the structure of the building, do you plan to put any security cameras, and where would you be putting those on the outskirts of the building?
That's a great question. You're in like design like 401 here. So normally we put cameras at strategic places where people can enter. So normally like where in the lobby, where the stair towers come down, where cars can come in. So all of those locations, we do not have a full security plan yet. So I don't want to tell you exactly where we're putting them, but we put a lot of cameras in. And it gets relatively expensive, but it's something that we need for the security of our own building and for our tenants to make sure that if anything happens, we have video.
Great, thank you so much, Jen. Appreciate it.
So there's a question in the chat about how do you avoid a bad party situation, and they reference the Airbnb on the north side. And your places are different than the Airbnbs, but have there been any in your other locations problems?
So the way we avoid this is we have a lease that is strongly worded, as well as we have property management on staff.
Mm-hmm.
And
on site.
Yeah, on site. So we very rarely have those issues. And we also have amenities that are kind of designed for people to have people over. I don't know exactly what happened in the Airbnb North Shore or North situation. But we do try to, we encourage people, if they are going to have people over, to have those in those public spaces, and they are monitored. We always have video cameras in those amenity spaces for that.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Dan. Any other questions from anyone on the call? We'll hold here for a few seconds just in case you want to come off mute. No? Okay. All right, I'm going to try and share my screen here. All right, well, thanks everyone for the presentations tonight. And thank you to everyone in the community that attended this evening. Next steps, additional comments can be shared with the Southside Community Council within 30 days from tonight's meeting. We do have a general mailbox that we monitor. You can send those to info@southsidecommunitycouncil.org, or some of you on the phone know how to get a hold of us and have our cell phones. And this project will present in front of the Zoning Board of Adjustment, which we heard would be sometime in January. And if you want to provide public comment, please visit the city's Zoning Board of Adjustment website, and you can find out how you can participate that day. In wrapping up, also please visit our website, www.southsidecommunitycouncil.org. You can view our past development activities meetings by linking to our YouTube page. You can also sign up for our monthly newsletters by going to the Southside Community website, as well as volunteer activities. And our next DAM is scheduled for the third Thursday of December, which is December 15th. And just to give everyone, our regular attendees, a heads up, we are potentially having a presentation. So Merry Christmas. So we'll let you know a couple weeks ahead of time. So if there's nothing else, thanks everyone for joining. Appreciate all the hard work that everyone puts in to attend these on a monthly basis. The Community Council really appreciates it. Thanks everyone. Have a great Thanksgiving.
Yeah, you too. Thank you very much for your
Bye-bye.
time.
Thanksgiving.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.